Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George Affleck.
And it's time for
UnSpun No Ho Hum.
And next week it'll be ho ho ho. Hey, we got a year-end show we got to let people know about.
Yes, that's right. Year-end coming up. We got a big... We're going to do a top 10 or something?
We are. So
we're going to do two next. Yeah, go.
So, but I want maybe people to hit us up at UnSpun Podcast on Twitter.
Oh, yes.
Tell us your top 10.
Yes.
What are the top 10 biggest political or unspun stories of the last 365 days? We're in UnSpun number 49, so we got
49.
Two more weeks till it's been a year, George. We haven't missed a week.
We have not.
It's pretty
been
impressive.
Beautiful.
It has been. And boy, we've seen sort of evolution in sort of what we talk about, because we try and keep it tight and local. When you're reading the Orca.ca, obviously you're reading the Orca. You're following along at George Affleck, at Jody Vance on Twitter. We try to keep things super local because the global politics sucks all the oxygen out of our brains very often.
Yeah.
But today, we kind of need to start
internationally.
It
was a big night. Old Boris Johnson.
You guys taught me about Bojo. I didn't even know that we called him Bojo.
There was one front page that had his clown nose on him. Bojo wins.
Bojo the clown.
Bojo wins. So biggest majority, worst showing for the Labour Party in the history of the Labour Party. This is actually the history, because I saw some analysis last night showing that it hasn't been, I think 1935 was the last time they had so few seats. But comparatively, as a number of seats that are available in the House, as a portion of the House, it's the worst they've ever done as a party. Here's a party that people thought a few months ago might win.
Yeah.
And now they've just been completely obliterated by Captain Hair on Fire. Boris
So
Johnson.
if you're just trying to keep up,
trying to fund something there.
I know he's very funny.
He's got the do.
He used to be a news presenter. He was a journalist, and quite what's the word? You want to say sort of personal and relatable to a certain base. It's just oddly familiar. He was kind of coined as the Donald Trump of the UK, you know, when people were starting to get to know this messy-haired, sort of disheveled Brexit, we'll have Brexit kind of guy, that people were like, oh my God, he's the nightmare, he's the worst. And yet, he's got a majority government, as you said, the best showing, or the worst showing for the Labour side,
and
which
the best
is Jeremy.
Thatcher for him, for the
Right.
Conservatives. So this is like a complete shock.
Jeremy
to most
Corbyn,
people.
but give people sort of an idea, because we know who Boris Johnson is. How did Jeremy Corbyn ruin it so badly?
Well, Corbyn, he ran last time, and he managed to get them into a minority situation. So I think the party was hopeful that maybe he could pull it through this time. Really, they should have found a new leader. I think that's the key. I think where he screwed up in this election in politics, you know, it was really Brexit was a big issue, and also personality was an issue. So he didn't resonate as a leader in any capacity. Really, the guy had some baggage about some things he'd said that were that have been said to be, you know, anti-Semitic. So there's all that baggage. But then the fact that they had the whole Brexit thing, and where did the Labour Party stand on Brexit? It was really convoluted. They were going to be talking about, it was wishy-washy. They were talking about having another referendum that would be really complicated. It sounded a lot like the referendum we had here about pro-rep, like this convoluted ballot, and you can't sell that. It's really tough to sell. And Boris Johnson's message was pretty clear. It's like, let's get this done. Let's move forward. Come on.
Brexit done.
Get Brexit done.
That's what Amanda, our executive producer here, was saying.
Get Brexit done.
Who happens to be a Brit, who is like, get Brexit done, 3 words. That was their political. And then the Jeremy Corbyn was like, well, we're going to do this, and then maybe that, and then we'll bring it back, and maybe do this. You can't say that in 3 words. I think
he was torn. Labour was torn because they had these ridings in that, like, mining towns where these are working class people who are like totally pro-Brexit. They think the solution to all of their problems, especially in the north,
is to pull out of the European
Union. Is to get out of the European Union. And
I don't know if that's
so
right, guys.
Corbyn knew that those were his people.
Yeah.
Yet he also knew he needed to win a majority. He needed to keep the people of the south happy, or in other places across the country, in Scotland where they're anti-Brexit. So he tried to play all sides, whereas Johnson just went in there. I'm Brexit all the way, and then breakfast all the way. It's as he said this morning. So
did he?
He was like, first, now we've got Brexit. Let's go for breakfast.
Let's talk about some of the promises he made, because he is now the majority leader. Like this is happening by a huge margin. So he had his little press conference. He had a press conference earlier today.
Yes. It's always funny, and the way the British do their elections, I always find, because I was watching it last night. So they in each riding, they announce the people on the stage, and they've got these crazy people from all these parties and costumes, and it's
quite a spectacle.
So you don't have it the same here, where you have ridings and then you only go to the person's location, and they're all in the same room. And then, so for the leaders, that's where they do one of their first speech. Like, so Corbyn did his speech at his riding with these weirdos standing behind him. And other competitors, and
his concession speech.
And then Johnson did his at his, and then he did a second massive press conference in the morning.
He's promising
London
the moon and
time.
the stars, everybody.
And he's talking about the environment by 2050. He's going to solve all of that. He's going to build big projects. Now, he is known for building big projects, and he was Mr. Bike Lane in London, right? He built all the bike lanes.
Yeah.
He was Mr. Bicycle Man, riding around his bicycle, which is counterintuitive to what a lot of conservatives would consider the right thing to do. But he likes building things. That's his thing. So he's got big plans and about building massive projects. And he talked a lot about in the north and in these communities that are really, just like ridiculous unemployment and suffering. And
and we're hopeful when you see somebody, like you said, he promised a big infrastructure piece in the bike lanes, and then delivered on it. Even though he's sort of positioned as the Trump of the UK, and we're still hearing, Trump would build that wall. That's what he ran on. Building the wall and beautiful, beautiful coal and,
I think that the main similarities to Trump would be like, the whole first, Britain first, America first, that whole campaign, like inclusive, very exclusive to their own country or their own countries. And it's, that's the real comparison in a lot of ways, is they become insular in their process of how they will govern. And it's all about them.
Dialing things back to a time when everything was insular before it broadened out. And the pendulum swings, right? And it is swinging rather wildly in Canada as well. It was a big day. We're lucky we pushed the taping of our podcast by a day, because yesterday was jammed.
Yeah.
Surprising many. Andrew Scheer is stepping down as the federal conservative leader.
Not surprising to me, but because I think I've said he had to. There was no escape from this for him. He really he couldn't go another election campaign. He
said he was going to.
Yeah, and I think actually what happened yesterday in England is a perfect example of why you can't. The guy doesn't resonate. He's not going to be able to pull it past. In fact, if they kept him, they probably would see the exact same thing that we saw yesterday in the UK, where, sure, Conservatives have a minority government in the UK, but this party just won't. This guy won't resonate. And in the case in the UK, he didn't. So I would say that's the same case in Canada with Scheer and the Conservatives. He didn't resonate. He didn't get the kind of mandate that he was looking for, or even hurt given the circumstances with Trudeau.
His big why I'm staying, it's like, well, we have a few more seats.
Yeah, no,
That's what that was like.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they took him to a minority, but it's still not a strong. There's no mandate there for him to stay. But as it turns out, there's a rumored or alleged money was used to pay for his kid's school.
The official, Mercedes Stevenson, Global News, was the first that I saw who broke the story. And she is the Ottawa bureau chief, and boy, somebody who does her due diligence in a big way. And what her wording was that it has been uncovered that Andrew Scheer had siphoned Conservative Party dollars to pay for his kid's private school.
Yeah.
That doesn't sit well.
Well, it goes against what he was sort of speaking about in the campaign, but obviously it's not cool. But more people must have known about this. This is not something that somebody would have been signing those checks within the party.
He wouldn't just have his hand in the piggy bank.
That's right. So it coming out now, and the fact that likely, if it's alleged, if it's true, was probably what pushed him to get out, right?
They wanted him to go.
Say, buddy, it's over.
And he wouldn't go.
Let her. Yeah,
so
they don't want to have the embarrassment of a convention where you lose the support in public like that. Just go.
I couldn't believe it, though, watching Andrew Scheer resigning and, sort of a weird, heartfelt grin on his face and talking about how long he'd been in politics and whatever, and then the MPs behind him, standing ovation every time he talked, and it's just like, oh my God, this is so weird. So much theatrics, it felt like. And then, the Prime Minister stands up, and I think, oh, here Justin Trudeau is going to just go at him now. He's been basically called a criminal and a racist for the past 6 months in the election, and it's all this like "I love you, man" moment. And I was just like, what's happening? Like, why wouldn't he just go for the jugular in that moment?
Well, there are two things. One is that that's generally not what you should do. I mean, I even when Gregor resigned, I said nice things. It was challenging for me, but I did thank him for his service and wished him the best of luck. But
because you're kicking him out the door. Is that what was happening? It's like
hard not to
Trudeau,
have a smile on your face when you're the person.
So he took the high road.
Yeah, of course. But he also was having a great day yesterday. I mean, that's first that, and then of course Jody Wilson-Raybauld's not squatting at her office, not willing to move her office, and she's a backbencher.
I don't understand what's going on there. Yeah. And I've been reading everything I can find, and within it, it's like it's not a suite. It's not like some fancy area in the Parliament building that because the Parliament building is under huge renovations, right? So they're actually in a different office space. And this isn't protecting or saying anybody's right or wrong in this, but in reading it, it seemed like all of it seems petty. All of it seems like, are you kidding me? We don't have enough going on right now that this is what we're talking about is where your office is because you're no longer the Attorney General. There's a
3-story walk-up that's about 8 blocks away that has no air conditioning and no heating that you're welcome to take. I mean, that's
because that's where they put backbenchers.
Backbenchers is not only in the house; it's also where you actually get pushed.
It's literal.
That's the world she has to live in now. That her choice, right? She decided to run it as an independent. Yeah. Liberals, as I've said here on this podcast, are going to make her life hell in any way they possibly can forever. She's the reason, for the most part, that they have a minority government, and so they're going to continue to make her life.
And she's pushing back on that by saying, "I'm not moving, and I'm going to make it."
It's not a good look.
And I agree with you on that. I have to agree on that.
You just got to be humble and accept the fact that this is how it works. You're in the backbench. You get the office that you're assigned.
Take your opportunities to make Canada better. This kind of fighting is not going to make the country better.
And so I'm sure Trudeau is going, let's go ahead, fight for your office.
So that's Jody Wilson-Raybould. Let me go back to Scheer for just a second because we're talking about a successor for him. And, I'm watching tons and tons of news now and speculation, whether it's on radio or on television. A lot of people saying that Rona Ambrose, who was interim party leader between Harper and Scheer, who wasn't permitted to run because she was the interim leader. The rule within the Conservatives, she couldn't run last time. Right,
so now
good point.
There's been a person in the middle.
But she's Alberta. Solves a big problem of Alberta not being represented, and Albertans feeling very...
Yeah. It's interesting when you're pressured like that she seems to be very solidly saying, I'm done. I'm done. And apparently she's being wooed by the Prime Minister for a post somewhere, and that would totally tear her out of the picture, but so far nothing like that has happened. I think that but the other name which I brought up before is Doug Ford. I mentioned this when he was doing that lovely press conference, and he's trying to make himself a bit more mainstream.
He really did go quiet in the run up to the election, and then when he did step out, he was all.
I would put him as a front runner. Really? I totally would, and I think because he
scare me, George.
Well,
because you're usually right. That's why you scare me.
This is the world we live. We got Trump. We got Boris. It's funny how we go with Boris, we go with Trump, we go first, last names. It's like, what name is the weirdest? Yeah. Trump, Boris, and now Doug Ford. You have to say both names. I think Ford doesn't make sense. It's Doug Ford as a potential leader choice for the federal Conservatives, the social conservatism. Right?
I wonder if those people who have traditionally been staunch conservatives because of the fiscal responsibility, because of it directly affects their bottom line, their bottom dollar, would be able to hold their nose and vote for Doug Ford, given some of the.
He's won in Ontario. He's won.
But will he win again in Ontario? Do you think?
I don't know, the polls seem to be fine for him.
Do they?
I don't know. They're going up again. I think it's like all politicians. You do your really hard stuff in the first year, and then you spend the next 3 or 4 years making your
glory years. Yeah,
and
the goodie bags.
That's what he's doing. He's already done the hard work. He did a lot of stuff, like it or not. He did. And now he's going to focus on the positive. I'm going to go with the not portion of the like it or not, with what some of the decisions that have been made. I've got a couple of really good friends who are teachers. I think was bloated. I think that was a good, tough decision, but to cut that down to significantly less wards, got rid of a lot of slowness of City Hall in Toronto. So, but the process was not democratic. But
and I would prefer a democratic process, obviously, but mine is more on the social side and watching. I've got a couple of really good friends who are amazing educators who who choose to work in areas that are the most challenged. And the resources that have been cut has just shocked me. And for somebody to...
and the programs, the actual
the programs and the availability of support for families that need it so much, like kids on the spectrum. And I mean, there's just this sort of, it's like cutting food stamps. It's like Trump cutting food stamps.
And I think pretty sure they don't have the SOGI program in Ontario, and I don't think they ever will under Doug Ford.
Right.
Which we do in BC.
Yes, we do.
Let's talk about here.
Because last week,
to you this week.
Thank you. Last week I was like, George, it's going to be an uncomfortable Thursday because I need to talk about the MPA with you. Because I had my DMs were like blowing up about the executive board, and then at the end, because we only do one take of this once a week, and it's got to be under 30 minutes because we promise you that. And at the end of it, he leans into me and goes, "You forgot the MPA." So this week, you're setting me up for it. I appreciate that, buddy, because I would have been mad if I'd forgotten it again. Okay, the NPA executive board. We have talked about numerous times here on UnSpun podcast, and the board, the elected people then elect the executive board, right?
Yeah, the membership.
The membership. So
yeah, for the most part. There are also ones that are, once the board is set, and there's usually a few spots available that they can put a person in, and they have already done that. That's news, by the way, probably. They've added a couple more people that are...
Tell me everything.
Well, the MPA board is, the MPA, who I am a member of, and I've joined in 2011 when I ran.
You were?
I am.
Oh, okay.
And so in this case, in the last AGM, there was a battle. I wasn't a part of this battle, but there was these somewhat centrists, and then somewhat would be considered right of center, and some people with some reputations that are, as
right
we've heard
of
now,
center,
and some potentially people that are perceived to be anti-SOGI, which is the program for the SOGI program is a program for educating kids in the school system
about gender identity.
Yes. So that's all that, and there's been a lot. Rebecca Bly steps down on Friday night, so that really started, creating a lot of
because Rebecca
craziness.
said, I cannot align with a party that I cannot be a part of a party that does not align with my personal beliefs.
She's a lesbian.
She's a lesbian.
So she is married to her partner,
and so an anti-LGBT. Or an anti-SOGI.
Even the perception of that was uncomfortable for her, as well as she mentioned that she felt the party was veering to the right. So as the board goes, it certainly has. It appears, and I think they've appointed two other people that would be perceived as
who are
definitely
the two other people?
I forget their names, but I know that they
two more.
So there were 4 available spots still to fill. So the board is way too big, and so there's this
it's
perception.
like 15, right?
15 now it'll be 17. I think it can go up to 19 or 18 or something. So it's
so it was 8-7. So now it'll be 10-7.
That's what they say.
So that they're like building the large majority.
Yeah, but a lot of them are 1-year terms. So especially those people who are perceived to be too far on the right of the spectrum. So there can be an initiative by anybody who decides to have them run for the board in next AGM, which has to be within, I think, a year or 18 or 16 months or 15 months. I forget the rules from the province, but it has to be within the nonprofit rules, or I think it's within 15 months of the last AGM. And so at that AGM, if there's somebody who has the energy to sign up members and get people to run for the board, that kind of makeup can change and evolve.
But if the members who have been signed up, who get to vote for the people who end up on the board, have elected to the board 10 people who are right or hard right, in a party that has been known to be centrist, maybe even a little bit left of center.
Well, I would say the party is made
conservative.
of a big tent, right? So we've had left, right, center, all of the map representation. The intent of the NPA was to have representation of the city as a whole, but with a clear understanding that the goals were like prosperity, pro-business, good democracy, transparency, that kind of stuff. And so, the fact that the party right now is perceived to be further right than, I think I've said publicly, is a challenge as far as I don't think you can win with that kind of approach.
I've definitely said that publicly, by the way. It scares the bejesus out of me to have
but
a
you
part.
know,
because of what's happening everywhere across the country
but that comes down to
and
leadership.
around the world.
It comes down to leadership. So if you get a leader in there that runs for mayor that represents that mentality and inspires people to vote for him or her, it's definitely possible, but I would say that
unlikely.
It would be unlikely
because currently,
I would say that somebody will run against that'll be centrist, and that will split that vote. And you need to keep the right of center together.
So you don't split the vote like Shauna Sylvester and Ken Sim in the last
Shauna got 35,000 votes. I mean,
Yeah.
she was only about 12,000 votes behind the other two. That's for somebody who's running as independent with no real money. I mean, she did really well. And,
she was an awesome interviewer. I got to interview her a
she
number
knew her
of times,
stuff.
and I didn't
She
really
knew her
know her
stuff.
that well, and she just came at it from a perspective of this is what I know to be true, and I'm going to keep talking about it, and very learned in her delivery. But that did, as you were saying, that did split the vote between those two, because Kennedy Stewart was voted in with not that many.
900 votes.
But not overall, what was it, 50,000?
Yeah. I mean, it's like 23% of the vote
Right.
or something. So
does that really? Let's talk about Kennedy Stewart for a second, because on Twitter yesterday, tell the story. What did you find?
Bob Mackin discovered in
Right.
FOI, Freedom of Information, of a video that the mayor did in November that he put up on Facebook, which was totally a promotional video about how great Kennedy Stewart is.
Everything he's done.
All the things he's done. SkyTrain, okay, well, to UBC, not your job.
No.
Housing, not really your job.
Nor is it done.
And the third one was the whole fentanyl issue and all that stuff.
Opioid crisis.
The opioid crisis, which
Nothing's done.
I don't know what's transformed on that front. So okay, great job, guy, dude who's an independent, one vote on the council. They spent $8,000, almost $9,000 on this video, as Bob Mackin discovered, and it's completely a campaign video. It's got his wife in it, taxpayer dollars, mayor's office, $1.3 million that wasn't cut, and incapacity. This is in the same week Bob uncovers this as this budget of 9.3% is being battled and fought over. It's just the optics are terrible. It's just kind of reminds me of Gregor Robertson, and I think it's real negative for Kennedy to do this. He seems completely glib about it. The interview on CTV that he did, he was smiling and thinking, "What's the big deal? What's the big deal?" It's like, oh my God, like this is a big deal. People in Vancouver are exhausted with the way City Hall operates and the
People
arrogance.
in Vancouver are broke with how City Council is
and they're
operating.
exhausted by this arrogance,
Yeah.
and he came across as so arrogant to me, and completely tone deaf to how people feel about the City Hall and the mayor's office and the 43 communication staff in City Hall who still haven't been cut. Sorry,
How
gang.
is that? I know I like them.
They're probably really talented, but there's too many of them.
I don't know anywhere
And
that
why
has
couldn't
43
they- and-
communications people and you can't get the leader on the phone.
And who doesn't know how to do a video? I mean, you've got 43 people and they couldn't shoot this video if it was a City of Vancouver video.
And who charges that much for a video? Like almost $9,000
It's funny,
for
there's a lot of people demanding me about that this was a great deal for video prices. I have a communications company, and
Not so much.
$9,000 for 1 minute of video is
So Vision
Big deal.
2.0 on one hand, and yet City Council able to unanimously pass so long overdue the Renfrew project.
So these are like rental, restricted kind of developments, significant in areas where single-family homes. So it's contrary to what those neighborhoods had. It was interesting to watch last night in the public hearing. A lot of NIMBYs saying, not my backyard, this is too big, it's too tall, it's 5 stories.
Did you see my post about that?
No.
Because you would have loved it. Because I'm a gentle density girl. Like I want to share my neighborhood if I don't want to have buildings and single family houses become multiple units, however it's built, then I shouldn't live in the city. That's how I look at it. I need to share my space, and happily so, to reinvigorate our communities, because our communities are freaking dying. So on that, I read that story about the gentleman, Mr. Rush, who has lived in his Kitsilano home for 25 years. He doesn't like the idea of a 5-story building being built next to him because everybody's going to be able to look down into his yard when he's barbecuing. He doesn't like that. And I was like, please, Mr. Rush, don't argue about a 5-story building because it could be 40 stories.
Yeah.
So, and maybe, as you say, should be because it doesn't cost more to go up, right? So
yeah, that's what the density can
NIMBYs
really go.
need to stop fighting the small, gentle density building. Like, stop fighting
And
it
to me,
before
Kits,
the
I'm going,
15.
isn't Kits full of these buildings? Like,
Yes.
they're 3-story. Most of them are 3 stories, but they're all over the place.
They're all over the place, and they're such a great part of the community, and that's where families live, and it's where you know all of your neighbors. It's where you can get to know every single person in the building if the building's small. Like, that's what I like, is you get to know everybody.
Yep.
It doesn't become like, okay, there's a big monolith that lives in the middle of our neighborhood. Like, if we just can wrap our heads around spreading out the gentle density so that we have an equal number as if there was a 40-story one, like, not to hijack it completely, but I look at this Renfrew project and I really like what it looks like. I like what it represents. I like how the spaces are laid out. I even went deeper in to see close to transit, how much do they cost. And one person brought up one on Twitter, one point about looking at affordability from somebody who might be dealing with accessibility issues. Because if somebody's only getting $1,800 a month total, how do they afford the affordable rental unit in there? Because they can't. Right. So there's a greater conversation.
Well, true social housing needs to be developed, and that needs the support of the federal and provincial governments. The city can't build that kind of stuff. But the fact that it passed unanimously, the Renfrew one, the other one's referred to the next council meeting. It's probably, they ran out of time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And generally, in a public hearing, if you can refer the vote back to council, you don't have to have the emotional people in the room. And
right.
Vision did this all the time, where they would refer it so they wouldn't have to deal. They would say,
they wouldn't have to say it to their faces.
We need some more research on this, so from staff to answer a few of those questions before we make our decision. But really, they just didn't want the people in the room because they really get mad.
Yeah.
And very few of them show up to council to see the actual vote, so it kind of just disappears. So I'm sure it'll pass. So the mayor can't take credit for this one because it passed unanimously, and he can't say it was his leadership. The MERPS program, which was started by the parties by when I was there, and this is just the first projects that are coming through the pipeline, which took it's 2017. I think we started that program, so it's taken almost 3 years to get the first 2 projects into a public hearing process, which is a bit disappointed. People. And now it's going to take another 2 or 3 years to build them. So
short on time, long on topics. Another thing that has been a struggle to see anything happen. Oppenheimer, you called it. Shots fired, victim in hospital, injunction hopefully being pushed through.
Well, they're doing another third-party audit. Come on. That's just called deflection of your responsibilities. John Cooper and Trisha Barker have been so on this. Let's just get this injunction, find places for these people to live, and get these people out of the park and make this park safe for everyone.
Apparently it's going to cost $2 million to fix the park. That's what I've heard through my grapevine. $2 million to fix Oppenheimer Park.
Yeah, they'll have to reseed the whole thing. They'll have to probably
replant
trees,
destroyed.
The bathrooms and all the facilities there. There's the showers.
I like Charles Gautier's idea. He found a project down in San Diego where the city sanctions tents that are hard shell tents that have bunk beds and washrooms and showers and things. Because if there's a homeless problem, which clearly there is here, we need to have a process that bridges people from living on the street to finding a place to live.
It's a sad statement but it's a possibility. But does it have to be in Vancouver? I mean, if it's going to be in Vancouver, please not on a park. If it's going to be in a park, it's going to be on city property that's not being used currently. But it doesn't have to be in Vancouver, Burnaby, New West. Richmond? Anybody want to stand up and help out here? We can't do this in Vancouver on our own.
But much of the problem on the downtown east side is people don't want to leave that area. Sure. The people that are homeless that are living there, that's their community.
The region has to get on.
True.
The whole country has to get on this.
They do. Thing. And that leads to my middle this week very quickly. It is like we've learned CPR, we learned the fire drills, we have earthquake drills, we even have lockdown drills in schools for gunmen, whatever. But we don't have how to deal with somebody who's having a mental health breakdown. Like, we should all have that.
And your piece is really good at informing us how to ask the right
questions. Just a little bit of do's and don'ts.
Of what to do with do's and don'ts. I thought that was really good.
Thank you.
So check that out on the Orca.
Check it on the orca.ca. And make sure you send in at UnSpun Podcast your top 10 news stories from the last year, and we're going to have
there are so many to choose from.
We will have our regular installment next week, and then around the New Year and Christmas,
a pre-recorded
top 10 that George and I will now arm wrestle for. That's it for this week.
Thanks.
I'll win.